Hello, everyone. It is Friday. Friday, and I just, for the record, I got booted from my last call. Well, in the sense that we were doing the second mini discussion for our latest book club selection, which is building the future of innovation on millions of years of natural intelligence. I finally got the name right, by Lean Goranson. And we were doing the second discussion, and that discussion was supposed to finish 15 minutes ago, but of course we always run over because we had so much to say. And at one point, one of the people on the call justifiably said, Tigria, go, like stop talking. So I'm here and I'm excited. I'm really pumped. It has been a very busy and very good week, which started off by going to see Dune Part 2. I have to admit that when I originally, many years ago, attempted to read the Dune books, I couldn't get into them. But then I watched Part 1 of this latest series, and I had tried to see some of the other remakes and it didn't work. But this one caught me. And Part 2 is amazing. So I don't talk a lot about kind of like pop culture type stuff, but Dune it's not really pop culture. I guess it's fantasy culture. I don't even know what it is. But anyways, Dune Part 2. Very good. Very good. So, and then yesterday I was asked, I was at the filming, you might have seen the post in NCC, where I was filming for a documentary called, I can't give you the name because I don't actually know the name yet because they're still working on it, but it's a documentary for PBS that will come out in the fall. I'm very excited. It just looks like, I mean, besides the fact that the production itself was great, but it also looks, from what I know about the actual like documentary and what they're doing and what we talked about, it's going to be absolutely amazing. So I'm really excited, kind of hot off the heels. I started publishing also about Gaia TV. As you know, I talked about it months ago that I was in this Gaia series, that I was filmed for this Gaia series, and the Gaia series is now officially out, called Divine Science. It's all over my page. It's also on my website. If you haven't gone to see it, go see it. It is so good. I am in episode 2, and it's just amazing. I'm thrilled. I'm super thrilled. And but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about, so if you remember last week, I attempted to do, I was driving back from Sarasota where I went up to see a group. I have a new group that's coming to Damanhur, and I went up to go meet all of them, and it was fantastic. Much thanks to Bev Templeton, who is working with me to organize this group. And she, the whole thing was fantastic. It was such a fun experience to meet people that are going to be coming to Damanhur to have this, nurture your nature experience. It's one of the things I love to do, to bring people. And yeah, we had a fantastic time. But on the way back, I thought I would make it in time to do our live commentary. And I attempted to stop in a public place and it didn't. Anyways, make a long story short, I didn't really make it. So this week, we're going to talk about what I thought we were going to talk about last week, which is the continuation of our discussion around Ecozoic. So if you remember, we did 2 weeks ago now. I'm trying to see if it has you all. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to find the file so that I don't mess up the words. And of course, now I can't even find what I'm looking for. So let me search for it. I should have been prepared, I know, but I was doing the other call, so I got kind of a little bit caught up. What? Okay, I'll find it in a different place. So basically last week, not 2 weeks ago, excuse me, we talked about what is Ecozoic, like what does it actually mean? What does the phrase mean? And what does it mean for this new epoch that they're trying to name? And of course, like in this moment when I'm talking to you, and I should be able to very quickly find things because this section of my computer is organized. And now I cannot find it. So either it's because I'm spelling things wrong or because it's just being mean to me. I have all my files listed. They're all correct and I cannot find it. Okay. We're just going to have to jump into the paper and we'll do it from the paper itself because for whatever reason, me attempting to do this whole thing with you is becoming a little bit embarrassing because it seems like I'm not organized. And I seriously, I am. See, it's telling me that nothing. Okay. Okay, we're just going to go with it because, oh, I'm spelling the word wrong. I just realized that I'm spelling Ecozoic as Ecozoic instead of Ecozoic. Okay. And yeah, anyway, we're moving forward. Sorry about that, folks. I am a professional, believe it or not. Okay, let's talk about this paper. I really want to share this paper with you because this is a paper that starts to get into education. So recently I've had these conversations with people about the education system. Now, I'll be honest, the education system is a huge conversation. We have several educators in our community and that are working on different aspects of education. And I want to be clear that like today's paper of trying to go from the Anthropocene to mutual thriving, let's even start with the fact that the Anthropocene is a word that we use a lot amongst ourselves, but it's still highly debatable and it's being contested as a word to really detail out this particular phase of where we are in geologic time. That being said, it's kind of not the central focus of what this conversation is, because this conversation is really about getting into what is this educational program or this educational direction that we need to move towards. So I'm going to share the paper right now. Hold on, like my things got a little out of control. And here we go. Okay, so let me share this paper. I'm assuming everybody can see it now. Yes, perfect. Okay, so this is something that came out in Sustainability, which is a journal, and this is an article actually, and this is from Anthropocene to Mutual Thriving, an agenda for higher education in the Ecozoic. Now, this has been something that was, as you can see by the number here of different authors, this is something that came from many different directions, which I think is really great. You know, McGill University, and you have so lots of people from McGill, the University of Vermont, the Department of Nutrition and Food Services at the University of Vermont, so different parts of the University of Vermont. And I think that it's important for us to have a conversation about this. I'm not going to get too deep into the education itself, although we're probably going to touch about it, but I really want us to start having conversations about, let me see if I can figure out how to word this correctly. When we're talking about all of these massive changes that need to happen, like our evolution, and we were kind of talking about this in the book discussion before here, we need to start having a conversation also about how we ourselves and our conditioning and our training and everything need to change. Now, I know we talk about that on an individual level here in NCC, and we talk about it for those of you that do, mentorship and coaching with me. That is a big part of it, right? Because it's all about us breaking free from our conditioning and moving forward into new, being able to be more open to our discussions, as well as then our decision-making processes being amplified by complete thinking or thoughtfulness. That's another discussion, but that came from our book discussion, like those two words. But the whole premise of being able to really have not just deeper conversations, but moving into more unencumbered decision-making processes. I'm going to say it in that way. So this paper, because it's talking about education, I wanted to evolve it. I wanted to go through it because I want to get an idea of how would we redesign an educational system on all fronts, because I actually find it kind of silly that we make it seem, which I know for many of us, it's not like that, but we make it seem as if education finishes with whatever, college or the university, but it's not the case. I mean, there's like, education is a lifelong process, and how do we always remain in that curiosity and in that movement? And what are we teaching that is more about a mutual relationships, like symbiosis, rather than thinking about education making you more of an individual. I don't know if that made any sense, but let's get into the paper and hopefully it'll start to make sense. Okay, here's the abstract. So remember, we're talking about an agenda for higher education in the Ecozoic. Higher education in the global north and exported elsewhere is complicit in driving the planet's, I always see everything as plants, and the planet's socio-ecological crisis by teaching how to most effectively marginalize and plunder Earth and human communities. Wow, they just started right off the bat, like completely started hot. This is not a paper that is going to play around and mince words. Higher education in the global north. The global north means all of the global north. We're not even just talking about North America. We're talking about Europe. We're talking about all kind of like civilized countries. Not my definition, by the way. And exported elsewhere is complicit in driving the planet's socio-ecological crisis by teaching how to most effectively marginalize and plunder Earth and human communities. I can't wait to get into the rest of this, because if that's where they're going to start from, this is going to be intense. As students and activists within the academic system, we take a firm stand to arrest this cycle and to redirect education towards teaching how to create conditions for all life to thrive. I would have loved for them to use the capital L here. I'm getting very much into the recognition that using a capital L helps us better understand that we are talking. It's kind of like Earth, as in the proper noun, Earth, that is our planet, versus Earth as in like this, as in the soil. Life with a capital L really means all the beings of this planet. And I feel it's extremely important for us to get moving away from the definition of life as something like I'm alive, but life as in every being of this planet that is living and evolving and contributing in their own way. In this paper, we articulate a research and education agenda for co-constructing knowledge and wisdom, and propose shift in the ologies from the current destructive modes to intended regenerative counterparts. We offer to shift from an ontology of separation to that of interconnectedness, from an epistemology of domination to that of egalitarian relationship, and from an axiology of development to that of plural values for world and meaning making. I love this sentence. I know it's a pretty loaded sentence and also has a lot of fancy words. It's not the fancy words that I like. I like the concept. The reason why is this morning I was having a really interesting conversation with my mother about just how much our worldview is influenced by our wording. Like we were talking in Spanish, which is no different than having this conversation in English, in the perspective of, she was talking about how, like, I can't remember the phrase that she used, but it was like it was something around the lines of like going out to do business, but it was battling in business, as if, and further proving the idea that our words, our constructs are based on this idea that being in business is cutthroat, being in business is competitive, being in doing things in this world is hard. Like there's all these different phraseologies that we use, and our ontologies around this are built on separation, right? They're built on this idea of difficulty, of me against you, and it's all kinds of different things. And that has to start in the education system from very young. We have to start to rethink. I'm having to rethink a lot of the phrasing that I use. Like I use the word triggered a lot, for example. And now that I've spent some time working on projects that, like not working on, but like being aware of projects that involve other things, I'm trying to find a different word, because triggery to me means very violent, connected to both the actual triggering process, but also guns and other things like that. And that's just a personal decision. But also many of our words and our phrases make the vegetal world inert. And even just the whole world, if you remember, you can go find this if you search in the naturally conscious community. We had a big discussion about the word kingdom, which was fascinating, because when we originally started to have the conversation, I was looking for another word, because Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom is a course that I have that uses the word kingdom, because that was the common phrase that everybody talks about, the plant kingdom, you know, the animal kingdom and such like that. But I didn't really want to use kingdom because I was thinking about it from the king, and I was like, queendom doesn't make sense either. But what ended up happening was that we went through not just the word king, we ended up having a fascinating conversation about the word dumb, the dumb part of it, how that's about dominion, which on one hand is land space, right? Or, but it's also about domination. And we went to the etymology of the word, and we got into the word, and it was so interesting, so much so that you might notice that on things that are within NCC, within the naturally conscious community, or that are within groupings of people who I know understand, you'll notice that I call it the plant kin home, or the animal kin home, K-I-N, as in kinship, as in the plural pronoun for the natural world, for beings of nature. And so kin in that sense, and then home rather than dome, like the idea that it's their home. So it would be the animal kin home or the fungi kin home. I'm still just introducing it in places because I can't put it everywhere, and I'm not going to go and change like my courses and stuff like that, because I need, I'm looking for ways to connect and that word, but it is in there. And even in the article that Nandini wrote that I used to explain the pronoun for nature, the ki and the kin, and that we also use here inside of NCC, we talk about that word, that kin home type of perspective. But for me, just that subtle shift, moving away from kingdom, like the dominion of a king, to kin home, where other kin live, was so liberating. And even recently, you'll notice that I'm introducing this term that I read somewhere, because I hate when we say human and non-human, or the more than human world, as if the human is the reference point. So right now I'm using other kin. I don't love the fact that it's other, because it implies still other from human, but other as in like, it could be even other from plants. Like, I'm trying to look for words. If you have suggestions for, right now, other kin, when I talk about, humans, animals, plants, and I want to think about all of them, I think of other, I want to think about all beings that are not human. I think of other kin, but I'm open to other words that might encompass everything better, because I think this is a really important part. Okay, let's get back to this paper. So such paradigm shifts reflect the foundational aspirations of the consilient transdiscipline of ecological economics. Wow, why do they make these words so? Foundational aspirations of consilient transdiscipline. Transdiscipline, though, is another word that I absolutely love. Most people will say an interdiscipline group, but what they really mean is a transdiscipline group. This was something that was honed into me by a woman that I worked with on a biomimicry organization that I was a member of. She was one of the founders, and she had done her PhD on transdiscipline. And it is a beautiful word, because transdiscipline implies that there are people from multiple disciplines all working together. And so interdiscipline is myself has many different disciplines, where transdiscipline is the group dynamic, where each person is able to contribute with their own discipline. So I really like that word. We analyzed several introductory university textbooks in economics, law, and natural sciences to demonstrate how destructive ologies are taught in North American universities. Can I just say that I love that this starts at university level? Look, I know we need to do a lot in the elementary, in the pre-elementary, and even in the high schools and junior high schools of the world. I am agreeing with you, all of you, middle schools of the world. No, they're not called junior high, middle school. I agree, but it's just not a place where I'm very good at. I'm much better when they get a little older. So I'm glad that this is actually university-based. And how such teaching implicitly undermines critical inquiry and effective challenge. Agreed. Our strategy for change is to provide a new theoretical framework for education, the regenerative ologies of the Ecozoic, based on physicality, embedded relationality, pluralism, and sustainable well-being of all members of community life. Ooh, I am going to enjoy this. Okay, let's get into it. 1. Introduction towards pedagogies for Ecozoic. The term Ecozoic, originating from the work of eco-theologian Thomas Berry, that describes a future era distinguished by mutually enhancing relationships between humans and the global community of life. If you want to know more about the Ecozoic, 2 weeks ago, I did my live commentary, which you can find in NCC and even on YouTube, to be honest, and my website is all about the Ecozoic period. There was like the definition of it, where it comes from, and one person's sort of thought process on why this is such an important era and that we need to name the Ecozoic deep time period. Unfortunately, or geological time, excuse me, the geological time. The problem is that this is future facing. So it's hard because everybody's really focused on the idea that we're more in the anthropod. These are those words that become hard to find. You know what I'm talking about. Like, we're not there yet. We haven't gotten into it yet. So let's just keep going. But I just want you to know that basically this going into the Ecozoic term, which is a term that I hadn't really used very much, was super fascinating and well worth the read. So go check out that live commentary in the replays. In this paper, we contrast the Ecozoic to our current era, one that goes by many epithets. Capitalocene, I haven't heard that. Plantationocene. I have to admit, I had never heard that one. Capitalocene, I had actually heard of. Civilocene, but one epithet we single out in particular is the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene, we purport, is an era distinguished by a human othering of nature and of the subsequent domination of this other. That's a good phrasing to use it. Unfortunately, the Anthropocene doesn't want to get accepted. There's lots of scientists that are against the term, not because they don't believe that there's a human intervention, but this implies that there's a period in which humans started interfering, and they say that humans have been interfering with the nature for a very long time before that. Here's the thing. The difficult part of all of this is that it is true that humans and nature have been hold on, I'm gonna stop the sharing for a second just so I can say this. It is true that humans and nature have been, like, humans are nature. So humans have been affecting nature just the same as beaver affects nature. Like, the overall environment is affected by every species that lives in that environment. The question that I ask myself is, at what point, and this is the way I look at it, at what point did human interaction supersede the interaction of everybody else? In other words, the interventions we do, the effect we have as human beings, when did that surpass everything else, including every other kin out there, including beings, living beings, and the overall overall evolutionary growth of the planet itself. So the planet itself, right? Planet has been evolving and changing. We've had ice ages and we've had extinctions. We've had all these things happen, right? And that has been influenced by many different species that do their thing and then something happens. The question is, when did human beings, surpass the sum of all the rest? To me, that is the part connecting to the Anthropocene. Like, that's when we become destructive. So while it is true that human beings have been affecting the planet and have been interfering and not interfering, have been a part of the evolutionary process because we are beings of nature, there was a time where our influence, because of the way our destructive nature, these are all the words that we need to change. Because of our destructive tendencies in this moment, our destructive conditioning, because I don't actually think it's part of our true nature, we went onto the other side. And to me, that's where the Anthropocene really starts. We posit that the global ecological crisis we face in the form of extreme weather events, increasing social inequality, environmental injustice, loss of biodiversity, climate change, and massive species extinctions are expressions of outcomes of a worldview that fails to see humans as deeply embedded in nature and to act accordingly. I'll agree with that. In envisioning the Ecozoic, Barry highlighted the critical role of universities, asking whether they will continue training persons for temporary survival in the declining Xenozoic era, and whether they will begin educating students for emerging Ecozoic. Okay, I get it. Our claim is that universities have yet to rise to this challenge. While there have been some attempts at greening curricula, updating courses, and piecemeal integration of sustainability concerns and environmental issues, such steps on the whole are inadequate. I'm going to agree with that. The challenge besetting the Anthropocene call for radical reorientations of curricula, practices of engagement with communities outside of the academy, reconceptualizations of what knowledge itself is, and rethinking of how this knowledge is being produced. Higher education, in short, has a central role in bringing the planet beyond the Anthropocene and into the Ecozoic era, and we believe that it is currently failing at its task. I actually really like that because I think we do take for granted that higher education in particular, but all education is really about preparing you for the future. But if we're teaching only the past, where is the preparation really for the future that we want to be living in? Therefore, in order to imagine the shift from the Western cosmological perspective of human, other subject, other relationships to an ecozoic understanding of a global community of life centered on subject-subject relationships, I would even say person-person relationships, we focus on the role of academia as a key purveyor of societal and intellectual norms. We argue that the academy itself must become a subject of transformation. And also, look, if the education system were to change, wouldn't that be the most beautiful example itself of the importance of being open to change? Like, if the educational system was always constantly responding and changing based on where we are in society, isn't that the best indicator of what a robust educational system can teach somebody else? Building on this critique, then we introduce and develop the concept of becoming ecozoic or ecozoic thinking being. Senti pensar, yeah. As a solve to anthropocentric thinking. We suggest it as a useful concept, so becoming ecozoic or ecozoic thinking and being. We suggest it as a useful concept for ecological economies and other embedded approaches to knowledge and understanding to draw upon. In order to promote their emancipatory capacities and to move more fully towards a shared imagined future on a planet that is symbiotically alive to a multiplicity of non-human critters. See, this is another non-human. That's where I would say other kin and things. Another kin is still not the best, but it's the best I have. Such calls have been made in the past. For example, Brown and Erickson call for the re-embedding of the normative disciplines, law, political science, finance, ethics, and economics into the biophysical foundations of human society. They also highlight ecological economics as a promising example of a discipline that advocates reforming higher education so that as to address the ecologically destructive nature of society, as well as a discipline which has made some headway towards such an end. We feel, however, that the problem besetting ecological economics from fulfilling its greatest ambitions center on the fact that the disciplines find itself embedded within a larger neoliberal system, a system built upon categories of an ontology of separation, an epistemology of domination, and an axiology of development. It's true, man. If the concept that you're in, if the overall environment, in this case, thought environment that you're in has one orientation, changing something small within it will get you somewhere, but it can't. Let's go to the conversation we were just having about kingdom, okay? Within NCC, within one little bubble inside of NCC, inside of our naturally conscious community, we're able to talk about kin home. And when I write, when I speak, when I discuss, when I bring plants into the conversation, we can talk kin home. But the course, my public facing course, is still reconnect with the plant kingdom, because the overall context in which the majority of new people find themselves in is the word kingdom, excuse me. Therefore, I can't call it reconnect with the plant kin home because people will not understand what I'm talking about. So if you're in an education, and that's just a very minute, basic example. If you're in an educational system where a law or this particular professor is talking about something in one context, but the overall educational system or the collection where when that person leaves that class and they go to present that concept to somebody else has a completely different ontology, then that person is going to have to spend most of their time explaining what is going on, and the other person is not going to be able to understand it. So we need to, this is why we talk so much inside of NCC about the importance of having a new paradigm requires a new vocabulary, it requires a new way of thinking, and all of that stems from, you know, the idea that I have to be able to change the overall paradigm in which I'm in order to then make changes to my behaviors and my actions and the way that I participate in that paradigm. Today, in many places, there's not even the concept that the paradigm, that the overall arching paradigm of language and of action has to change at all. Or even if it thinks it has to change, there's no sort of consensus of direction. So I think this is really important, and I'm glad that they're bringing this up. Let's see. Here we make the case for a more ambitious research and teaching agenda for ecological economics, informed by an ecozoic perspective and focusing in particular on these three categories. We examine the ontologies, knowledge practices, and exologies currently limiting our capacity to transcend the Anthropocene by analyzing undergraduate textbooks. Ooh, what a great place to start. The textbooks are scrutinized as artifacts, tools, and social objects, through which our understandings of the world are put forth, and through which students learn the rules and facts as handed down from the path-dependent intellectual legacy of Western Enlightenment thought. Ooh, thought. I have to make a note of that word being used there. In this method, we are part of a tradition. Foucault saw in the 17th and 18th century scientific text positioned within society almost as epistemology on its own. The textbook was fact, and knowledge itself situated within a conceptual system. This is a great, this line, this little piece right here, the textbook was fact. I hadn't thought about that, but that is true. Where if I read a regular book, something that is not called a textbook, I think of that book as the opinion of the author, whether it's a novel or it's fiction or it's nonfiction or whatever it might be, but it's still the tale or the version or the understanding from the author. When I read a textbook, I don't actually think about who the author of the textbook is because I take the textbook as fact. And this makes it extremely important if we're going to create a new future to start with textbooks. Was knowledge itself situated within a conceptual system? This notion was later reiterated by Paxson, who likewise emphasized how statements become fact explicitly because they are found in textbooks. Agreed. Next, we describe our vision for what pedagogy, textbooks, and other forms of learning knowing could look like within a pedagogy for the Ecozoic. Here we argue that the Ecozoic requires new approaches and new textbooks to tell a different story that more accurately reflect both new and old understandings of interconnectedness, engages with conceptualization of the human and of being, reaffirms and celebrates other ways of knowing, and emphasizes our embeddedness in nature while building greater respect for the species alongside which have co-evolved over vast space and evolutionary time. Ecozoic pedagogy is both a practical response to biophysical realities and an ethical response to the dire present. Its process or praxis is of equal importance to its context, and we focus on the mutual transitions of both. In this manner, our goals are twofold. One, to nourish the growth of healthy, joyful, self-determining, self-regulating, moral human beings. The moral human beings part sounds good, but morals are still based on your concept. How about value-driven human beings? I like the idea of value-driven human beings more than morals, because morals are societal guidelines, which we all think we all agree on, but we don't. So I like the idea of value driven because that implies that the person evaluates and thinks about their values and core principles and then acts on them, which today many people study. They study or they think about their values, but then they're very much feel societal pressure to not be guided by their values. This is a big topic that comes up in almost all of my mentorship clients. Moral human beings embracing in process and outcome. How about embracing in the ability to change? I like that better. What Albert Schweitzer's poetically called a reverence for life. And here again, I think this life should be with a capital L. And number 2, to inspire a praxis in defense of that life, capital L, tending students' capacities to build coalitions of solidarity powerful enough to effectively dismantle systems and structures of domination and oppression, and in their stead, to build, maintain, and reproduce equitable systems of thriving multi-species communities. Okay. In the essence of not going after domination, here's how I see something. This own phrase almost talks about domination because the dismantling of systems and structures of domination and oppression, all beautiful sounding, right? And I agree that has to happen. I think of it a little bit more as like, let me take the wind out of your sails. I feel like what's more important is to inspire a praxis in defense of that life, teaching students capacities to build coalitions and solidarity powerful enough to effectively live value-based lives that support these directions in thriving multi-species communities. Because if you do that, let me just say, you do not have energy or time to support dominion-based stuff. You just naturally like suck out all its energy, suck out all of its like potential, and just falls flat. And therefore it crumbles on its own. That's not to say that there aren't times when you need to fight for that, but I'm just saying, can we not put that into the charter itself? There is already a fighting mentality, but more of leave that alone. Let me focus on the things that I actually want rather than trying to take control of other things. That's just the way I look at it. This reorientation of collective social life towards the service of its own maintenance as an ecologically embedded subset of life is fundamental to our goal. We conclude by suggesting that our ologies of the Ecozoic, ontology of interconnectionists, epistemology of egalitarian subject-to-subject relationship, and axiology of plural values and world-making practices can be used to examine current curricula and lay out what a research agenda for ecological economics and other normative disciplines could look like. This paper emerged from a university-led collaboration, Leadership for the Ecozoic, a graduate student training and research partnership. We write as a group of students, scholars, and activists from 7 different nations of diverse genders and racial, ethnic, and cultural backgrounds. We share the fact that we are all from elite educational faculties, at least they say that, and consider ourselves complicit in the decline of life's prospects. I agree with that with myself too. Acknowledging our positionality as within that system, we argue that we are present in many ways, learning to plunder. It is our hope that we might learn to teach both the emergence and the maintenance of various mutually enhancing relations. Beautifully said. Okay, hold on a second. I just want to see, where does this paper go to? It just helps me understand things. This is 14. Okay. Okay, so 2, the theoretical framework. In order to transition intentionally, equitably, and hopefully to the Ecozoic, we must first understand and address the conceptual structures and assumptions that contribute to the aforementioned crisis of the Anthropocene. We identify ontology, epistemology, and axiology as dimensions in which normalized and rigid concepts and assumptions must shift in order to realize the Ecozoic. I do like the fact that they're not implying that we're already in the Ecozoic, but that this is about helping us reach the Ecozoic. And I say this not because I don't think we are or we're not. That's not the point I'm trying to say. But I feel like it's really important for us to recognize that what they're looking to do is create a framework that allows us to continuously move forward. And I think that that's really nice. Like, nice. such a weak word, but it's such a, like, I mean, I feel like this is important to recognize. And I do love that they recognize their own role, because I go through that a lot too, where I look at where I am and I say, I feel like I'm still championing a lot of topics that I myself am very clear. And when I talk about it with you, it's like, we still don't even know how to get there. I champion the fact that we should get there, and that I want to get there, and that I want to be a part of it, but I recognize I'm a part of the problem. And therefore, the only way we can get out of that is to work together, because my thinking alone isn't going to get there. While these dimensions are equally entangled, we address them separately for analytical purposes. In outlining this tripartite framework, we draw on the work of many scholars, activists, and thinkers whose ideas and actions foster radical and transformative paradigm shifts across various domains of knowledge and practice. These contemporary thinkers themselves draw on others from both within and outside of the Western traditions. Collectively, this diverse group grapples with common assumptions about the nature of reality, power, and knowledge. I'm one of those, while imagining creative and grounded visions for a world where many worlds can fit, a concept aligned with the Zapatista's increasing well-known dictum of the pluriverse. The pluriverse. I've heard pluriverse and multiverse. Which one do you think it is? Like, are there a difference? Is there a difference between the pluriverse and the multiverse, or are they just two words of the same thing? This has always been a question of mine since I first heard the words, because I'm like, what's the difference? Philosophically, the outstanding predecessor in regard to our ologies of the Ecozoic is the British philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. His concept of a philosophy of organism, or as it is more commonly called, process philosophy, reveals clear parallels to our proposed movement beyond separation and domination, and towards a new valuation or axology beyond development. The philosophy of organism is an attempt to move beyond metaphysical categories such as substance, essence, and subject, object, into relational schemes of world unification, whereby the underlying entity of valuation, rather than a substance or essence of sorts in Aristotelian or Cartesian metaphysics, is itself the recognition of the interconnectedness of all things. Thus, instead of perceivers and things perceived, we are to come to recognize the deep interconnectedness of all things as which gives value to the world. This reminds me of a phrase that I use a lot that I think is really important for us as human beings, especially to always remember. We can observe nature. There is a moment when you are the observer. You can be with nature, but you also have to remember that at the same time as doing both of those, you are nature. And man, do we forget that too much. We completely forget it. Other figures who are important in this school of thought are Teilhard de Chardin, which we've talked about in previous papers, and John Cobb, environmental ethicists. Likewise, have been engaging with such ideas for decades, and we would be remiss to not mention some key figures in this movement who have both contributed to and, again, preceded our ideas. These include Aldo Leopold and his land ethic, Agne Nice and the deep ecology movement, Ramona Cristina Elea and her work on extending ethical arguments to animal rights and environmental movements, ecofeminism and its emancipatory potential as expressed by pioneers such as Val Plumwood, and lastly, Gregory Cajete, and his work in bringing issues of indigenous ecology more to the forefront of Western environmental thought. A lot of these topics, like ecofeminism and some other perspectives, we've touched on in previous papers. I highly encourage you to go and look through those. All of them are in the Naturally Conscious community under Sprout discussions, programs, replays. You can find them all there. Some of them are on my website, but I didn't go back and go from the very beginning, where in NCC are all of them. In aligning ourselves with radical thinkers who have gone before us, we aim to build upon a well-established critical genealogy of and alternatives to Eurocentric narratives of modernity, colonialism, and development. We use the word ontology as a set of claims and practices around what the real is. and how that understanding is enacted across time and space. That's a really great definition for ontology, because I think ontology is a word that is we see it often and we talk about it often, but it's difficult, I think, to define. So it's a set of claims and practices, including language, by the way, in that, around what the real is. So around a specific topic, whatever topic that means, right? The topic might be anything like mugs. I use very simple examples. A mug has a set of ontologies, claims and practices about what it is: mug size, mug dimensions, they're just, the ontology is the world in which that mug exists and how that understanding is enacted across time and space. Epistemology, as applied within our framework, refers to how human and non-human agents represent the real. How humans and kin agents, I don't know. I feel like it's so sad that we have to extract the word humans because we forget that we're kin. Like, can we just use beings, refer to how beings, and that includes human beings as well as like plant beings and rock beings and all other kinds of beings? Anyways, refers to how humans and non-human agents represent the real or reals. So that's how they carry it out, how they represent it. Finally, we acknowledge that value in what brings the real into being, and employ axiology to assess how value assumptions and the beliefs and actions they justify interact with ontology and epistemology to contribute to the crisis of the Anthropocene. In building and applying this framework, we hope to identify how shifts across these dimensions can contribute to realizing the Ecozoic. Ontology of separation. Underpinning scholarship, religious tradition, and social institutions is the Anthropocene. In the Anthropocene, is an ontological dualism that conceives of humans and natures as separate domains. This dualism has two deep roots, one found in ancient Greek philosophy and Plato in particular. I like Plato better than Aristotle, by the way. I mean, Aristotle did a few things that I really enjoy and I appreciate, but there's some other stuff where it's like, oh my goodness, no. And the other, Aristotle's, see, always talking about Aristotle's account of the difference between humans and other sentient beings. In several of his dialogues, Plato defines and delineates what he calls the realm of ideas, an external and unchanging. Why would you ever add unchanging there? Realm of entities existing beyond the material world. I love that you're talking about real realms of entities that exist beyond the material world. I will agree with that, but it's not unchanging. This metaphysical separation places human beings in a distinct class apart from other beings, with Plato purporting that while there exists another world of sorts beyond the material, only humans and the human mind can access it. Is that what he's saying? Really? I mean, the realm of ideas, I used to teach the realm of ideas a lot more from a Kabbalistic perspective and also from a spiritual physics perspective. They exist in both. And is it really something that only exists, is access from the human and the human mind? I don't know about that. I don't know if that's a good definition of how Plato put it. Maybe that's how it's being taught in universities, but from the esoteric perspective of how we teach Plato's thinking around this, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, do you see this as something that is only all right? Whoever becomes a scholar of Plato or is a scholar of Plato, please fill in the gaps here. This separation was subsequently seized upon by Neoplatonic and Christian philosophers and was incorporated into Christian philosophy and, by extension, the collective consciousness of the emerging Christian West during the Middle Ages. This part I will agree with. So that Plato's thinking was taken by the Christian thinking and interpreted as the human mind is the superior mind that can access everything. This I will agree upon. But I don't think that that was Plato's original intention. Even more wildly and deeply influential is the Judeo-Christian creation story found in the book of Genesis. There are several features of this narrative which help set the stage for an ontology of separation. Agreed with that. Perhaps the most important are the doctrine of special creation. That humans are created in the image of God, and that nature itself is profane and in need of redemption, so that then we may retake our rightful place in paradise. I hate even saying that line. Like, it hurts me to even just say it out loud. That feels hurtful because it's so, I often wish, if this is why they would never give me access to the time travel technology at Dominator, because if I had access, I would go back to this time period to be a fly on the wall. Like I want an invisibility cloak, and I want to be able to walk through the different places where discussions were being had around the creation story and like the whole creation of the Bible and the philosophies. And I want to understand how we went from where we were to a much more interconnected reality, and even the separation of the three mother worlds of like the plant world from the human world, which is the animal world, and the world of the nature spirits. Like how did any of this stuff happen and why? I want to be a fly on the wall. I want to be there. I want to be in the room, as they say in Hamilton, when it happened. I want to be in the room when it happened. This separation was further developed and instantiated in the modern consciousness with the expansion of modern science during the Enlightenment period. Thinkers such as Galileo Galilei, René Descartes, and John Locke articulated a dualistic metaphysics which separated the living world into distinct categories corresponding to the mechanical philosophy and its doctrine of primary and secondary qualities. I have to say, okay, hold on. I have to say this, because as a Kabbalist and a spiritual physicist, yes, that is a term, and a sprout, I do agree in realms, and I agree upon different layers. I think maybe, and I keep asking myself, like, what distinguishes this work from the separation and the ontology of separation that we have and whatever? And it's the fact that, first of all, I don't believe I'm the only one, like humans are the only ones that access this, first and foremost. On the contrary, I feel like humans are the last ones to access this. And second of all, I guess I don't see a primary and secondary in the realm of importance. There's a primary and the second one in the sense of succession, kind of like nature has succession, right? Nature itself, nature themselves, self, see, I always still struggle with words, has a succession model, a model of like something that comes first and then happens next. But that doesn't mean that one is better than the other. They're two different realms. They're two different levels. I'm curious as to, again, going back to being a fly on the wall when all of this was being determined, is how did you mistake the idea of succession and the idea of development having stages to one stage being better than another? And is this where the root of all of these problems are? I mean, why? Why did we need to, why? I don't know, why? It's just so weird. Descartes, in particular, widely hailed as the father of modern philosophy, emphasized a distinction between the human mind and the world of matter with his doctrine of res cognitans and res extensa. These dualisms ultimately resulted in a further division of the world into categories of subjects and objects. And that's the part that doesn't make, because the world of, thus, the Anthropocene is largely defined by othering, human viewing both non-human nature and each other as other. This ontological division has profound implications, particularly in determining who has rights and by informing who counts as whom. And this is true. This is, of course, all of this is, this is important because it's not so much, and this is like, I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I feel like I don't see the entirety of the problem as the fact that we see others. In other words, we have a separation. I think the part that is extremely important is the fact that we only see ourselves as others, and that we have lost the ability to just be interconnected. And for those of you that will be participating in I Am Plants, this is why I created an implant. Why do you want to reawaken your plantness? You reawaken your plantness because our animalness, because we are animals, gives us access to our instinctual nature to the fact of reaction, which means there has to be something that happened that's outside of me that caused a reaction, or even could be inside of me from a physiological perspective. But I'm saying something that I recognize that creates something, and I have an instinctual reaction. Our plantness gives us our beingness, our interconnectedness. It is the part of us that reminds us. So when we separated out from the world of plants, we lost our ability to have that, to recognize, feel the beingness, the interconnectedness of being. And we have moments where we glimpse it, where we feel it. Have you ever been in that deep meditation? It might only last for a teeny tiny second where you feel connected to everything. That's it. That's that beingness. I don't actually think it's horrible that we have both. What I feel is the problem that has led to so many of these discussions that we're having is the fact that we only have that. And therefore, we're not able to easily step into our beingness, our plantness, our vegetality, our interconnectedness as humans in order to act from that place. That's where I think. So I feel like sometimes we focus so much on what we shouldn't be, but you know how it is. When somebody tells you, don't think of that, that's all you think about. So if you tell me I shouldn't be this, that's all I think about being. Is that instead you have to give me a new model. It is with increasing number of scientists, academics, theologians, indigenous leaders, and activists voicing opposition to such views that we stand and take our position. Scholars such as Thomas Berry, Arturo Escobar, Anna Greer, Donna Haraway, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Bruner Latour, Maria Miles, and Vandana Shiva are prominent among those who have recognized the fallacy of separating humans and the natural world. We stand with them in our efforts to reimagine Homo sapiens or Homo insapiens, as Margulis and Sagan argue, and Homo economicus to embody the reality that human species are interdependent and inherently embedded within ecosystems. I've been playing around with what is the next Homo species, like the next one that's going to come out of us, like where are we going to evolve to? Homo divinus, Homo, wait, I've had a few others. Homo divinus is one. I don't remember. There's more. I'm going to come up with them. I'm drawing a blank right now. I'll get there. I mean, I have them and we've talked about them here. I just they're not thinking about it right now. In aligning ourselves with these thinkers and their ideas, we acknowledge that the full complex world is rendered largely invisible through an ontological lens that reduces the real to discrete entities, independent variables, factors of production, and allopoietic systems. Epistemology of dominion. While an ontology of separation inhibits the acknowledgement and honoring of complexity, we identify similar implications stemming from epistemological norms of the Anthropocene that are prevalent within higher education. We agree with those who identify the epistemic crises of our age as one of dominion. Within our framework, the epistemology of dominion refers to the hegemony of narrow and exclusionary definitions and of knowledge and the knowledgeable, or the knowable, of knowledge and the knowable, and the consequent marginalization of other ways of knowing and being. Exactly. This. As both outcome and evidence of this epistemic domination, power resides within the self-appointed people and institutions that determine, epistemize, and rigify definitions of knowledge, namely science. She blinded me with science. Many, if not most of the professions and attendant notions of expertise. Alongside science and experts, rationality and objectivity dominate the epistemic landscape. An outcome of this domination, I know, I should have to stop back because it's true. The whole science thing, scientists know things, but scientists are also interpreting their data. So it's not always a given. Not only is not their interpretation always correct, but their interpretation is not the only interpretation. And it could be more interpretations of the exact same data that are also correct. Alongside science and experts, rationality and objectivity dominate the epistemic landscape. An outcome of this domination is the creation and imposition of universals that invalidate and make invisible the alternative and non-anthropocentric ways of perceiving the world and creating knowledge. And this is why, from a Daminhurian perspective, there is no such thing as truth in the world of forms, because truth is always part of a prism. There's a prism, and there's many facets, and all these different facets are all one version of the truth, because truth always passes through perception. The only way for us to get close to absolute truth is to have as many sides of the facet of this prism as possible. Because with more sides, we put these together and weave them together and start to get closer to the harmony of truth. So truth is always a harmony. Truth is a coming together of different parts. It's never a single entity, really. An outcome of this domination is the creation, sorry, I read that. An epistemology of domination, like the ontology of separation, has roots in Judeo-Christian texts and was further developed and justified in the modern era by Francis Bacon and René Descartes. This approach of learning places exclusive emphasis on the human, and more specifically on the male, as the agent of knowledge, creation, or discovery. According to Bacon, the world was to be conquered and pried to reveal her feminine secrets, a belief that is manifested in the scientific and colonial practices of the Enlightenment period and remains standard in Western approaches to studying and knowing the world of humans and nature. The standardization of epistemic approaches has profound implications for people, institutions, communities, and beings whose existence defines rational, reductionist, and scientific constructs of knowledge and being. Opposing narratives are deemed ignorant, worthless, and often made invisible by the dominant epistemology that refuses to acknowledge other ways of knowing and being. I like that they've included knowing and being, because I think it's very easy to focus on just the knowledge part of it, but embracing that knowledge and becoming that knowledge is a whole different thing. So I love that. Going beyond an epistemology of domination, our vision requires an epistemology of rationality between human and other than human beings. Drawing from our Amerindian anthropology, moreover, we claim that humans do not have monopoly over the world of meaning. Non-humans are active meaning-making beings in that they represent the world in other than symbolic forms. For example, anthropologist Eduardo Con's work with the runa of the Ecuadorian Amazon offers unique ethnographic evidence on the intrinsic sign-producing capacities of non-humans, such as plants and animals. Very interesting. Very interesting. Axiology of development and progress. In considering problematic and rigidified assumptions that define life in the Anthropocene, we assess how Western ontological and epistemological norms interact with and inform axiological emphasis on progress and development. Emphasis that grows directly and easily out of the idea that nature itself is profane, and that the project of progress is to regain our rightful place in paradise. Sorry, it's just like, it's ick. It's ick, the idea of like nature is profane. It's like the opposite. In particular, we identify the growth narrative propunded by the anthropocentric Western world system as a problematic product of the epistemological and ontological assumptions previously explored. We thus employ an axiology as an analytical tool for assessing how values are produced and mobilized to advance a singular hegemonic vision of the real. In particular, we analyze how the values of progress, growth, and improvement are used to naturalize and justify development-oriented paradigms across the world at the expense of local practices of cultural and economic difference. Social institutions produced by or aligned with this hegemonic view are predicted upon a narrow definition of progress that directly or indirectly justifies the oppression of certain peoples and non-human beings. In particular, colonial and development-oriented notions of universal history and progress reify humans as subjects and all other beings as objects without rights. They also cast other ways of being as inferior and regressive, potentially even immoral, and need of salvation. I'm almost like glossing over this as I read it. Like it's so harsh that it's like, ah. In transitioning out of the Anthropocene, it will be necessary to re-embed social institutions in the relational and complex interdependence of ecosystems and life worlds. Given the problematic evolution and implications of an axiology of development, we align ourselves with the likes of Charles Darwin, Lynn Margulis, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and others who have proposed axiologies of relationality and reciprocity. Darwin, of course, disrupted ontological and epistemological biblical anthropomorphism by connecting humans to all living beings on the planet. Go Darwin. Margulis, who we don't talk about enough, we really should talk about her more, extended and deepened this realization with her conceptualization of symbiosis, extending the web of life down to the microscopic and thus further challenging the separational and hierarchical ontologies and epistemologies that emphasize human exceptionalism. To state it in terms of nu cha nut, scholar Umik E.R. Atleo, I'm doing the best I can, the principle of interdependence, living in balance and harmony with diverse life forms, should be applied to every dimension of life, of existence. This relational, oh, I like that, living in balance and harmony with diverse life forms, that even means people you don't like, by the way. It's like living in harmony with all of them, should be applied to every dimension of existence. This relational approach thus seeks to decenter the human in socio-ecological and normative systems while attending to the knowledge-making capacities of other than human beings. In this, I am wishing that in all of these papers that we read, where we talk about humans and other than humans, I'm surprised that there hasn't been, maybe there is, and I just haven't found it. If you find it, please let me know. I'm looking for a paper that says, we're going to stop using the term human and other than human all the time. I get that sometimes it's necessary. And we're going to just use this word to mean all beings, including humans and plants and, all kinds of microscopic organisms and tardigrades and everything. I want a word that, because if I use it alone, do we just call ourselves being? I use beings a lot. And when I use beings, I am talking about human beings as well as plant beings and all other kinds of beings. To me, being has become that word. I think of us as kin. And so I wrap that into it. But I feel like we should all have one word. In this tradition, current academics such as Kai Chan, Rachel Good, and Alder Coleman Saxena are developing and expressing relational values in the axiological realm as an alternative to the purely anthropocentric instrumental and intrinsic value distinction. Further, the working of the aforementioned thinkers and practitioners, we believe that a paradigm shift in education, particularly in the field of ecological economies, is a necessary and collective endeavor. We therefore propose a framework to support shifts away from the paradigm characterized by an ontology of separation between humans and the larger community of life, an epistemology of expert knowledge and dominion that either invalidates non-modern systems or renders local beliefs invisible or non-scientific. I think the second part is even really more important, because it's like we put this label that says it's non-scientific and it's not true. It's like it can be visible and non-scientific and still be true. An axiology of progress perpetuating a universal view of history and culture, and finally a development of growth-oriented pedagogy that displaces alternative local and place-based social, cultural, and economic practices. All right, so those are all of our definitions. Now we're getting into the methodology. What do we have left? We have methods, and we're not going to get through the whole paper today. And results, actually. We already get to results. Ooh, and then there's a discussion. Let's see how far we can get to in a little bit more, if you're okay with us sticking through this. And let's go a little bit farther, because I think this is really interesting. Wait, where were we? We were right before, that's the results. We were right before this. Methods. Okay, As humans, we explain the world in a certain way based on what we believe to be true. However, it is through the very act of naming, categorizing, and ordering that we become embedded in what Heidegger referred to as a Gestalt, and thus the way we exist in and interpret the world. Naming, categorizing, and ordering. This process of enframing is especially relevant to higher education in the Anthropocene, when popular introductory texts made implicit and or direct claims to the universality of their theories and values, claims which reify and give ontological status to the same epistemological and analytical tools that created them. This circularity helps to reinforce what John Law refers to as the one world, an ontologically and epistemologically homogeneous world that claims superiority while discounting and making invisible other realities. This is, you know what's really interesting about this? So I'm breaking for a second because I think this is really interesting. So as you all know, I used to work at Microsoft. And when I worked at Microsoft, I took a lot of different workshops, especially because as a woman in high tech, there was, just things you have to keep an eye out for and things you have to understand and how to navigate the world, especially back in that day, right? It's a little bit different now, but anyways. What I find fascinating is that many of the things that they taught us, especially as women, to do really was just reinforcing the male dominant nature, nature is not even right, societal norm, rather than creating an ambiance for exactly what we're talking about here. I'm going to use an example which was triggered by what we just read, right? So as a woman, we were told that many women tended to write in their emails, for example, things like, I think, I believe, very inclusive frameworks and wording. We tended to say sorry a lot, or like, excuse me when you felt like you did something or when somebody else was bothered or whatever. And we were told to take all of that out. So don't say, I think we should go in this direction, but you should make it a direct, we should go in this direction. And that's the way you look more like a leader. Which is hysterical to me now, thinking about it, of like what they did, what these classes taught us. And I think about this now, even in a lot of my own content that I write, like, especially if it's like in a marketing nature, I'm going to have to rethink everything, because I realized that I moved into a model that was much more definitive, like do this type of thing. And there is benefits to that in the sense that it motivates people because of the way that our current stage is. So I think the reason I'm saying this is because I think about this in the context of the difference between, for example, my public facing content versus our discussions in NCC. In our discussions in NCC, it's much more of, I think, I believe, what do you think? How do you see it? It's a discussion. Because again, there is no absolute truth in the world of form. Because we've created an environment there, right? That's the whole reason why NCC is so important. We've created an environment here for the ability for us to have these broad-reaching discussions and to contradict each other, even with our thoughts. And so therefore, we can begin and still be seen as an authority. I am still an authority on plants, even if I say, I think a plant is doing this. I am still somebody who is knowledgeable and has a whole series of experience, and I'm taken seriously and I'm believed and I'm trusted, even if I don't give you absolutes to everything. Where in the outside, what we're talking about changing is the idea that only absolutes rule. And therefore, discussion is very, very difficult to have. And therefore, changing of ideas is very difficult to have. And the idea that there is a superiority is very difficult. So people aren't allowed to draw their own conclusions. They are given the conclusion because I am an authority and I give it to you in a certain way. I find this absolutely fascinating right now, which I hadn't thought about it until I read this. So I'm glad we're reading this together. in order to be able to get there. Because and interesting. Anyways, the aim of the investigation was to identify whether a set of widely used textbooks support our claim of perpetuating problematic ontological, epistemological, and axiological assumptions. Thus, selected introductory textbooks from the author's respective areas of formal educational training were reviewed. These disciplines included economics, law, and governance, and economics, law and governance, and applied natural sciences. From these disciplines, 10 textbooks readily available at university libraries in Canada and the United States were randomly selected and analyzed to determine their pre-analytical assumptions. The texts chosen were considered to be typical of and foundational to their respective fields. Each reviewer made an initial independent analysis of the textbook and received feedback from their advisors. A second, more refined analysis was then carried out. From this second round, a subset of authors reviewed the documents to identify the emergence of common themes. They then assigned these themes to different groupings of pre- and analytical assumptions to develop the aforementioned frameworks. So here are the various textbooks that were analyzed. I'm just looking and seeing if I know any of them. Comparative legal, energy and policy. Interesting. Okay. The results. Okay. Seeing where we are actually halfway through this paper. So given the fact that we are over our time, I'm going to stop and pause here, and we will take over part 2 going forward. I just realized that I wrote the title here as I don't know why I did that. Ecozoic instead of ecozoic. I'm tired today, can you tell? I think this is fascinating. I am so excited to dig into these results, but I want to be able to give it the time that the results need, because the results are going to take some time, right? Because we're going to comment the heck out of all of these results. So we are going to be starting on page 7 next week when we come back to finish this, and I'm going to publish this part 1, and we'll leave a space for part 2. I will probably do it next Friday again. And I always say this, I always leave it open that if I feel inspired, I might do it earlier. But if I do, I'll make sure that I notify you so that you know that it's coming and that you can see it. But it must most likely be next Friday, because, there's just lots going on always. There's always lots going on. This is going to be, I'm excited. I'm excited. Next week, we have a lot of stuff going on. So I am, as usual, we have a masterclass coming up, the next plant-inspired masterclass that is happening on the 12th, on Tuesday, inside of Blooming Sprouts. We'll have live commentary on Friday. We have our writing group, which is actually going to be our budding, are we at the budding? Yes, we are. We have budding artistry on Wednesday. So it's not, so in addition to writing, which you can do, but we're really going to bring more creative art. So this is the place to bring all of your art supplies and everything so that we can do this together. But we're going to have a great week next week, just the same as we had a great week this week, because we always have great weeks in the Naturally Conscious community. I will post this. If you have any ideas, thoughts, comments, please post them, because we want to have a discussion. We want to talk about this. I'm very curious as to what your thoughts are on this paper. And until next week, then we will see each other. Just remember to resist the urge to hold back your evolving green brilliance. This is me, Tigria Gardenia. I am out. We will see each other again in our next call. Bye.